You are listening to Wicked Psychotherapists, a podcast where two psychotherapists show you that taking care of and learning about mental health doesn't have to be wicked hot.
Hey everyone, this is Tanya.
Hi, this is Erin, and welcome to Wicked Psychotherapists.
Today, we are talking about something that we thought we could shed a little light on. It's probably a type of therapy that you've seen, but maybe are not fully aware of what it means, how it comes out in practice, and that is somatic therapy. So we thought we'd just kind of talk about what that means, who it's for, like what clients are ideal for that, or, might consider it, and, what it's used to treat, as well as some examples. So somatic therapy is, the connection of the physical body with mental health and being able to align that with a mind-body connection. So basically, it's incorporating the physical with the mental and, being able to use that as a treatment course. And this is something that can be used with clients if they are, requesting it, because I think have you seen it popping up a lot more lately? Kind of like the word somatic therapy or the phrase somatic therapy.
And it's interesting too, because I knew we were doing this episode. It seems like it's been showing up a lot on my Instagram feed of people advertising that they do stuff with it. So I was like, all right, it's now
That's creepy
in my brain. But yes, I have been.
Same for me.
It's weird, but I have been seeing it more. And I know a lot of times I was thinking the book, The Body Keeps the Score. I know a lot of people talk about that and know that. And if they have read it or heard about it, that you're like, oh, well, there is a mind-body connection to trauma, to anxiety. So that, and it's an older book, but it has opened the conversation about it too.
For sure. That's I feel like the Bible of somatic therapy, for us therapists. I find myself recommending that if people are inquiring about the somatic effect, of trauma on the body or grief or disorders. And there's also, this is just a little random tidbit fact, but there's a workbook that goes along with it that I've used with some clients, and it's really helpful. It's really cool that you can get on, I think, like Amazon or something. We're not affiliated with it. I'm just saying it's really helpful. But it's so true that it pops up everywhere, especially once you say it out loud, it'll pop up on your feed. But it certainly can be used for a lot of different things like trauma, grief, chronic pain disorders, depression, PTSD, grief, addiction, sexual dysfunction, things like that, because there is a large component with those diagnoses with having physical manifestations that may not be completely addressed in talk therapy. So it works with how maybe trauma is stored in the body and how different things, different exercises that you can do in order to try to relieve that while also processing some of these mental health issues. So it kind of all works together. It's all very symbiotic. But I just kind of wonder, was this something that you were familiar with when you first started practicing as a therapist? Was this something that you incorporated automatically but didn't know it was somatic therapy? Or did you kind of not really have that understanding of it?
I think a little bit of both. I did incorporate it, but I don't think I knew what the term was at first, because I'd work on the breathing, guided meditation, encourage people to start a meditation practice or go to yoga or take a yoga class or walk or have movement, not realizing what it might be called.
Yeah, that's the same. That's why I asked you, because it's the same for me. I feel like this is kind of always an incorporation of the therapy, because of course there's going to be other components other than just the actual speaking back and forth. And I think we maybe are just now starting to kind of categorize that, or, really kind of put an emphasis on that's a type of therapy that you might want to focus on, and can't even be a specialization. You can look for somatic therapy. I don't know what certificates they take or what, kind of certifications, but people that are looking for, this particular type of therapist, some therapists may just work with it and some of their methods. Like I think you and I, we will incorporate some of those methods, but we're not considered like somatic therapist. That's not like her specialty kind of thing. So that is kind of, I guess, just the vocabulary to it. If anybody's wondering if they're looking for something like that, yoga and meditation in and of itself are somatic therapies because they incorporate that mind-body connection. But, I wonder, who are the clients that you feel would be appropriate for this? Or when do you think this would come in as a discussion of using some of these somatic practices?
I usually will suggest it or talk about it if it's somebody who comes in presenting with high anxiety or has history of anxiety or trauma, not current unresolved trauma, but maybe PTSD or something that we're working on the anxieties with it. So usually a lot of anxieties or fear or panic disorder, those type of things, I do tend to use it with it a lot.
Where there's like a lot of physical components to
right,
that, like
because
panic attacks.
Yeah, because with the panic attack, with the anxiety and things like that, you are feeling it in your body. And sometimes you're able to recognize where it's showing up or where it's coming from. And with the breath work, that seems to help people recognize it a little bit too. And I have had clients tell me after they started going to yoga or even when they do the guided meditations at home that it really has helped lessen their anxiety a lot, incorporating that with going to talk therapy.
Yeah, I think is a really good combination, a really good way to combine that and incorporate that. Yeah, I similarly, I've found with some clients, I will feel like there's a plateau in the talk therapy, and there may be some physical symptoms that they're bringing up that just are not quite being addressed. Or maybe there's some sort of kind of feeling of there's something more to this, but I can feel it, but I can't quite express it verbally.
Mm-hmm.
And, chronic illnesses, things like that to deal with, manage pain. I think there's been some clients that, have had like complex PTSD that just cannot get out of that freeze state. And in terms of like they're in that survival state. And I think that's a really good candidate for somatic therapies. I think some of these practices, just to shed some light on some of the things that you had mentioned already, Erin, some of the breathing work, grounding, meditation, yoga, progressive muscle relaxation, body scanning, things like that. These are all things that can be practiced in session. And usually, personally, I will like practice a little bit, kind of see how that feels, get some feedback and kind of say, maybe this is best to try when you're in the moment with these symptoms. Maybe it's best to try if like before going into a situation that causes some stress, or, maybe this is a good kind of post, symptomatic kind of practice to help kind of bring you down. And so I think kind of setting up that schedule is really important to know how the client can use it, as well as practicing and getting the feedback from the clinician. The client can say, okay, now I know how to do this. I'm not just kind of guessing.
Right. And you're giving them other coping skills too by doing that. And it reminded me too, another one is like different grounding techniques, because you are being aware of all your senses and kind of being almost forced to look inside your body a little bit too, to help alleviate some of the anxieties.
Yeah, for sure. And, I do think there are with that in mind, I do think there are some clients that maybe you might want to be really careful and trying not to, maybe kind of trying to see if this is something that works well with this client or not. Or maybe this might have to be someone who is well versed in somatic therapy, maybe an in-person somatic therapist. And that may be, I was just thinking of this, maybe somebody who has, been a sexual assault victim, or somebody who has something with the presence of being in their body and not knowing what that might cause if they go back to that trauma. And so really needing someone to be there and to guide them and to have that support. I think that might have to be something that you'd have to be kind of particularly careful about in terms of like as a practitioner,
right?
Just to make sure for that. That's part of probably would be in the screening process and just talking about it. But can you think of any other clients that may not be like a good candidate just for, having some somatic exercises, but maybe would need maybe like a specialist or, someone
Yeah,
who
like someone
specializes
who,
in it?
we mentioned PTSD, but someone who has fresh trauma, maybe
Mm.
someone who has like a mood disorder that might not be treated, or the word that's coming to me is controlled. I know that's not the right word, but
Managed.
yeah, managed. Thank you. And so I think those would not be very good candidates. Like someone with, schizoaffective or schizophrenia who it's not managed or medicated properly. Those might not be the best for this right now.
And we're not saying they may not be the best for somatic therapy overall, but they may want to consult with if that's what they're seeking out, they may want to seek like a specialist in that to see if they are appropriate for that or not. Because they
Right.
might be, but they might just need kind of a different process
Yeah.
in that,
And I have heard really great things about where people incorporate dance, or like almost, like where they do yoga in the therapy groups and they do incorporate dance and different things. And that might be in a group setting, and something like that also might really benefit different varieties of clients that have an expert doing, an expert teacher, an expert therapist doing this.
Yeah, I think so. And, I think this is, the goal of somatic therapy ultimately is, I think, for clients to develop their own resources and to regulate their own emotions, which is,
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're looking for, mentally. This is just kind of connecting the physical component.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and this is the goal of most of our time in therapy, is to help our clients to get some skills and to have the ability to regulate. And, with the somatic therapy, it's using your body too. And not just, as Tanya said, not just traditional talk therapy.
yeah, for sure. And it certainly has been. It's an area that I've been exploring a lot lately because I have been seeing an uptick in clients asking about it. And I've also been curious about it myself just because of feeling like sometimes talk therapy does not address some of those symptoms. And so I've kind of just been like, okay, well, what can I add on as an adjunct? So I have a training that I am going through. It's like a self-paced training. And I do think it is really helpful to have that. And, in case anyone doesn't know, I think we talked about it here. We are constantly having to have CEs or continuing education credits every 2 years for our license renewal to keep it. And so, and I like to learn things, like anything I can kind of have that is like useful in the moment. Like I'll say, okay, if clients are asking about somatic therapy, I'm going to take a CE program on, somatic therapy so I can have some of that.
Yeah.
I kind of take like a general survey of like what people are asking and what I'm interested in. So I do think that you can definitely build up these skills as a therapist. But again, if you're, it depends on if you're looking for, someone who specializes in this, if this is something that you feel like this is what you need, or if this person maybe knows some techniques, but maybe it's not their specialty. And either one, it just depends on your situation. And it's just about kind of asking about that and in the intake, and kind of seeing what fits or not. So with that in mind, I was curious, have you yourself ever used any of these somatic therapies or, kind of had any experiences with them?
I think so. I try to incorporate meditation. I do the guided meditations. I haven't lately, but I do like yoga, and I try to incorporate that. And I notice when I do incorporate both yoga and meditation, my mental health feels better. I feel like my anxiety is lessened and quieted down a lot. I try to get out in nature and walk. So I guess I do try to move my body. And I think that helps me see where my anxiety might be showing up too. Like the more aware I am of my body, I think the more aware I am, like, oh, wait, it's showing up like in my chest, or I'm feeling a little tightness, or, maybe I need to breathe, take some deep breaths or something.
Yeah, that's a good like signaling mechanism to see kind of where it's showing up. And you also do gardening, which can be considered its own kind of meditation.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do find that very meditative. I actually like doing the weeding and digging and all that, like the heavy, not fun stuff. I find it quiets my mind completely. because you don't really have to think about anything. It's just like, okay, is this a weed or a flower? Let me just pull that out and throw it in the ground, throw it in a bucket, dump it somewhere, and that's all I have to do. It's just, and it does. It just quiets the background.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really, that sounds like such a meditative way of just kind of, processing your emotions and just feeling good and calm within your own mind and body.
Yeah. And how about you? I know you do yoga and
I do hot yoga. I do just regular yoga. And that for me is very helpful. It is absolutely, I can feel the mind body connection in that. I was telling Erin earlier, if you have an instructor who kind of speaks on some of these elements, when you're in particular poses, they'll kind of talk about, and this may not be, everyone's experience, but I think a lot of yoga instructors will incorporate kind of some of these maybe like meditative / mental health components that I'm not even sure if they're aware of, but it very much is like mindfulness, like thinking about when you're in a particular pose, which may be hard to hold. They start to talk about, you're at your edge and what is it that you can do. And this moment is for you. And this is something that, you can concentrate on and you can have. And it just is something that really sticks with me and really helps me to slow down my very anxious, future-oriented mind. And it's really helpful to calm my anxiety and kind of that inner chatter that I have going on there.
Okay.
I definitely like meditation. I've been doing that through a live stream place that I subscribed to recently. And that's been a really great way to start out the day, I think. And that's, kind of gives you like to, a feeling of what is it that I do want to focus on. Again, kind of pushing away some of that stuff that we carry in from the previous days and saying, okay, let this day be as it needs to be. Yeah. And I just find these things really helpful. And I think that it's important for you to know how it works for yourself. So you can also, as a clinician, to be able to say, well, this can also, I personally, know this. I mean, not that you have to tell them this, but,
Right.
you can recommend it because you know that it does help with,
Right.
I think it's fair to say Erin and I have anxiety. So it certainly helped us. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, also I was thinking too, when you're saying that, it's really important for the client or whoever you're talking about to have a connection, a mind-body connection, because a lot of times people are very disconnected with what's happening in their body. And they're just like, I'm getting these stomach issues, or I have a headache, or I'm having trouble breathing, or all of a sudden my body hurts and I don't know why. And having some form, like some way to connect it really does help figure out like, oh, maybe this is connected to something that's happening with my mind or happening with my emotions.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that can certainly come from, experiences like we were talking about, difficulties with grief, PTSD, anxiety, depression. I also just had a thought that maybe there is some dissociation from our bodies with all the technology available, and we kind of are really inside of our heads. And maybe that just might be helpful for a lot of mental health in general with that, to reconnect with your body.
Because that is a way that I think a lot of people go to for their disconnect or their unwinding, instead of automatically saying, well, I'm going to go for a walk, I'm going to go garden, I'm going to go do yoga or whatever. They'll say, well, let me go start playing a game. Let me do this. I know I get stuck on that a lot. I'm like, well, let me just play on my iPad for a little bit and play a game or something, instead of instantly being like, well, do I want to do that, or should I go outside? Let me just sit in the grass or go for a walk. Or a lot of times we don't think about that because it's like, oh, it takes so much time. But in theory, it probably takes the same amount of time. But it's just what would actually benefit our mind and body better at that moment.
Yeah. And I think it's in developing that feeling of, oh, this actually feels really good. And the more and more you practice it and saying, okay, I actually do, really need some sun, or I need some, exercise or some movement that would help this along, because I remember I'm starting to realize that connection, because like you said, there can be a huge disconnection after a while of just kind of going to this and saying, that's fine, that works. that's fine. That
Mhm.
works, and going to scrolling, going on social media, whatever it is. And so I think that this is really important. I think that's probably why this is popping up a lot, other than probably there's something probably on TikTok or something talking about it too. So there's probably a trend in that. But I do think there is a need for this connection at this point in our technological era for sure. I think it's probably something that we're just going to keep developing and needing. I don't think it's going anywhere
Yeah.
because it certainly is a disconnect with technology in general. Of course, it
Yeah.
is connecting in other ways, but it is also
Yeah.
disconnecting.
Yeah.
So,
Well, think about how much better you feel like if you work in an office or, and you have a couple of the friends that you walk around the building with, or, then when you come back in, it's like, wow, I felt like I just had like a 2-hour nap or something. You just feel more refreshed. And it's because you're moving, you're outside, and you're socializing. In that moment, that is a form of somatic therapy, but you don't realize it.
yeah.
You're just walking with friends.
Yeah. And kind of realizing those moments when you need them and the times when you need them and the frequency maybe of needing it, is kind of something I think we would work with in therapy, and just kind of recognizing those
Mhm.
patterns of, oh, maybe, instead of, going to, I don't know, look on Instagram, scrolling down and everything, maybe replacing that even once a week with this and seeing how that feels. Does that feel a
Mhm.
little better? Maybe start to associate that with, oh, that should be my go-to.
Yeah.
And so dealing with patterns of that and behaviors and how that feels is a big part of this
Mhm.
somatic therapy too. Have you recommended somatic therapies to clients in terms of like for homework or practiced in
Yeah.
session?
I have like with the guided meditation, there's a couple apps that I really like, or even have like there's some YouTube channels that have good guided meditation. Same with yoga. There's a couple actually, it seems like a few people like this one person on YouTube, they follow her. And then, or if they have the money, go to a live class because that's also nice too to be in a room with people, with real people. It's
Yeah.
something about it. So I do recommend that. I also always ask people, how often do you go outside? When do you go outside? How can we set this up? How can we get you to move a little bit? Even if it's just throwing a ball to your dog for 5 minutes outside. Maybe that can become a walk. Maybe that can become something else. Just because with both anxiety and depression, any form of movement, even 10 minutes a day, can really help lessen both of them. And a lot of people don't realize that, a lot of times we hear of like, oh, with depression, moving, but it also helps with the anxiety too.
Yeah, for sure. And just being able to associate a time when you can feel good and you have control over that and that you can go to that, it can definitely become a coping skill. Yeah. And I've definitely had, I think like, we've probably all along been recommending this and just didn't know it was somatic therapy, but just the
Right.
practice of grounding, like I've done the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1
Oh,
with
yeah.
the senses, kind of
Yeah.
exercise with people.
Yeah, I see.
Um,
I that's my go-to too. Like, what colors do you see? What sound? What do you smell? Those are great because those are things you could teach them. But then hopefully when they're starting to feel stressed, that can help them.
Yeah. Yeah. And kind of that feeling of if they're feeling disconnected from themselves. I'll kind of give like a broad list, go over some, and then the person may come back and say, this actually made me feel kind of frustrated, or I didn't really like this, or, and then so we kind of cater it around to say, hey, maybe this just isn't for,
Mhm.
maybe you like the breathing exercises, or maybe
Yeah.
you like the, progressive muscle relaxation, right? Or
Yeah.
the visualization, but you don't like these. And that's totally fine. You don't have to like all of them. You can like just one set of whatever it is that works for
Mhm.
you.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like to give a nice variety and kind
Mhm.
of work on a few of them and then say, hey, I want you to practice when you're feeling calmer and see which ones kind of appeal to you.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I like to try and do in our sessions.
Yeah. And then another too is reminding people to drink water when they're feeling a little anxious, or 'cause sometimes that will help. It helps you slow down a little bit. It helps you because you have to kind of slow down your breath a little bit while you're drinking water and while you're having it. And that also helps with the mind body connection a little bit too. I recommend that a lot.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So, I mean, this is just kind of, we were just wanting to throw out there some knowledge, throw out some lessons on somatic therapy, how we
Mhm.
use it, just so you can have a little bit of a clear picture and how it runs in a therapy session. But we hope you enjoyed this and this can help to just expand your knowledge a little bit of different types of therapies that we use. But I think we're good to wrap it up here, right? It's
I think so.
yeah.
I hope they learned a lot, and and
We'll
you all
give
might
some
be
nice
doing some of
tidbits.
it. You might be doing it and you don't even realize it or didn't know what it was called.
Yeah. And that's a good takeaway too, is you might be. And it's just if it's, something that you have a problem incorporating or you need help with that, that might be an option for therapy.
Mhm.
Or if you just want to practice with someone. So don't forget to leave us comments and suggestions for future episodes. We love that. Leave us a review, that helps. Where can they find us? On Instagram,
Facebook. Yeah, Instagram is what is it? The Wicked Psychotherapist.
at Wicked Psychotherapists. Facebook is The Wicked Psychotherapists. Yeah. Subscribe, tell your friends, help us out.
Mhm.
Like that.
Leave a
Good
review,
stuff.
share.
But yeah, let us know anything you want. And we are always open for suggestions, ideas, comments. But in the meantime, don't forget, stay wicked.
And keep your mind well. Okay. Well,
Yes.
have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. We'll see you next week.